This is Steve Ridgel, and I want to talk for a few minutes this morning about my friend John, who just became a Christian, was just born again. He's a brand new believer in Jesus. But I want to tell you about John because I hope you'll see what you can do to bring people into the kingdom. Maybe you're like John was and you're not a believer yet. Or maybe you're a believer and you get excited about seeing people come to Jesus, but you're not sure what part you play. So I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about John's journey. Now, John's an ex-offender. He got out and he was staying in a halfway house. And there are two people that really connected with John. One is Joseph. Now, Joseph is in the halfway house also, and that's how he and John got to be friends. But Joseph is a believer. In fact, he was baptized into Christ about 6 years ago, and shortly after his baptism, he was incarcerated. Now, the interesting thing about Joseph is, and this doesn't happen a lot in prison, addictions, and when Joseph got out, he was very passionate about trying to follow Jesus. Now, right before he went to prison, he met Gary. Gary is a passionate believer who shares his faith, and Gary had spent some time with Joseph, and he communicated with him when Joseph was in prison. And when Joseph got out, Gary was there to say, "Let me help you." And Gary gave him rides to church. And so Joseph started really coming to church all the time. And at the halfway house, Gary did a lot of the Bible studies because a number of men there wanted to study the scriptures. They're either believers or they're interested in being believers, or they think maybe it'll help them stay clean. And so there's a lot of Bible study. And so John was invited by Joseph and started coming to the Bible study. Got to know Gary. Uh, I'd say Joseph now has been out and coming to church about 3 months. Well, about 6 weeks ago, John started coming with him because Gary gave Joseph a ride, and Joseph invited John, and so Gary picks them all up, brings them to church. There's a couple other guys in the halfway house. Joseph's girlfriend comes. There's quite a collection that Gary picks up and brings to church. And so John's coming to church. He's talking to Joseph about Jesus. He's listening to Gary teach about Jesus. And he started going to Bible class. He was listening to our preacher every Sunday. Nathan does most of our preaching at Hillcrest. He's listening to Nathan. And Sunday mornings, Nathan teaches a class called the Seeker Class for people that have questions about God and about Jesus. And John started going to that with Joseph. And so he's hearing Nathan teach things. On Wednesday night, we do a class called the Jesus Journey that I usually teach. But this summer, Chris is teaching it a lot. And he came in there some and heard Chris kind of doing a survey of God's work through the generations, through the ages. And he was really interested in that. And so he's got all of these things pouring into him. And life's a little hard for John, not just because he's an ex-offender, not just because he's in a halfway house, not just because he's really fighting his demons and determined to stay clean, but he's got some physical handicaps too. And so it's hard for him to be real mobile, has to use a cane, and it's hard for him. But he decided more than anything he wanted to follow Jesus. And so this last Sunday, Joseph baptized John into Christ. It was touching, it was emotional. Gary was there with them, and I was there, and it was just it was a sweet and emotional time. So if you're like John and don't know Jesus, I'm praying there are Josephs and Garys that come into your life. And maybe you're going to meet some Johns who need you to talk about Jesus like Joseph did with John, or to study with them about Jesus like Gary did. Or for all of you preachers and Bible class teachers, maybe this week there's somebody in your class or next Sunday listens to your sermon who does not know Jesus. So I'm proud of my new brother John. I'm proud of Joseph. I'm proud of Gary. Proud of Nathan and Chris. May the kingdom grow because of men like that.